Making more money is something a lot of us would like to do, especially at the moment, considering the crazy financial situation we've got going on. With inflation, interest rates, we'd all like to have some more money in the bank every single month. And it's also, as I mentioned in my last video, an important step towards achieving financial freedom. But what are some of the ways you can start making some extra money? Let's find out. So number one is to work overtime. Now, obviously this depends on the company you're working for and whether or not they offer overtime. But if they do, it can be one of the quickest and easiest ways to start earning some extra money. The only drawback is you have to work more hours at your job, which for some people isn't going to be a bad thing, but might not be ideal for others. And option number two is to get a second job, because if overtime isn't an option where you work, or the overtime isn't that regular and there's not that much available, you may want to consider getting a second job, basically something that fits around your main employment. So if you worked Monday to Friday 9 to 5, for example, you want to be looking at something where you could work on evenings and weekends. This could be working in a bar, restaurant, delivering food, or driving for Uber. There's plenty of different options out there. So these two first options are a great way of making money in the short term, but over a prolonged period of time, they're not ideal. And there's a couple of reasons for this. Number one is burnout, because if you work too many hours on a regular basis, you face the risk of burnout. And this could be mentally and or physically, which isn't ideal and could actually reduce your ability to make money in the long term. The second one is you end up living to work, which honestly you don't really want to be doing, because there's things outside of work. It can take time away from family or doing things that you enjoy, which honestly you don't want to do. You don't want to spend all of your life working, which is why for me, I will be looking at ways to make the most of the hours that I actually work and look to ways to increase my earning potential. So what can you do? So the first one of these is to ask for a pay rise. Now, this is something a lot of us don't like doing, but if you don't ask, you don't get. And especially if you've been performing really well in your job, it's worth asking to see if there's any potential for a pay rise. And there's only one of three answers you're going to get. Number one, yes. Number two, no. Number three, don't let the door hit you on the way out. And the next option is to get a promotion. This is where you start working your way up the management ladder. And the best way to do this is to speak to management or HR and ask what the options are when it comes to getting a promotion, and also whether that is potentially in your future, whether you'd be considered for it or not. And if you are going to be considered for it, this can result in you getting paid more money per hour for the amount of hours that you work. Yes, you'll have more responsibility, but you're going to be compensated for that. And for a lot of companies, they actually prefer to promote from within, because number one, it's cheaper for them to do so, and number two, you're a known entity. They know whether or not you're a good employee or not, and that's a bit of a risk when they're bringing in somebody from the outside. And option number three is to get another job, because there's a lot of people out there that are finding that by moving companies, even though they're doing the same job, they're getting a pay rise every time they move. And there's people doing this every 2 to 3 years, and often finding that they're getting between a 10 and 20% pay rise. And also they're finding that they may get extra benefits, and also they have a reduced workload as well, because the new company values their skills more than their existing employer. So it's definitely something to consider. So the next option is to retrain for a better paid career. Now this is a more long-term approach, because it's going to take time and effort in order to train for that new skill, get the qualifications, whatever it is. But over the long term, you could end up generating a significantly higher income for yourself. But when it comes to retraining, there are some things that I think need to be considered. The first one is, are you going to enjoy it? Because it's going to take time and effort to get the training, the qualifications, whatever it is. And also this is something you're potentially going to be doing for the next 10, 20, 30 years. So ideally you want it to be something that you're going to enjoy. Number two is future-proof. Now this is something I think needs to really be considered at the moment. How likely is that career going to be replaced by things like AI or automation? Because ideally you want to train for something that's going to have a bit of future-proofing built into it, because you don't have to be retraining in another 10 years' time. And number three is you want to look at the demand, both the current demand and the projected future demands for that career, which they do for a lot of different things. Because the more in demand a skill is, the more power that gives you in the marketplace. So it makes it easier for you to get a job, and it also gives you more leverage when it comes to negotiating pay rises or moving to another company. And number four is, how much control does this new career give you over your own life? Does it give you leverage in the marketplace? Do you have the opportunity to go out on your own in the future? And also, if for some reason you happen to lose your job, maybe the company you work for went bust, is there a way you can make money from that skill until you find a new permanent position? All things I think need to be considered when it comes to retraining for a new career. And the final option is to start a side hustle, which is basically where you start a business around your full-time job. And there's lots of different options out there when it comes to starting a side hustle, but there's good options and then there's ones that are a complete waste of time. And in my opinion, what makes a good side hustle is a combination of 3 factors. Number 1 is it's flexible. You can work on this easily around your existing job and commitments. So you can do this in the morning, in the evenings, weekends, even on your lunch break if you want to. Number 2, it's scalable. It has the potential to become a full-time income and beyond. And also it's something that you can build potentially on your own. You're not going to need a team of people in order to start generating 6 figures a year if that's your goal. And number 3 is the income should be relatively passive. Basically, you're not having to directly exchange your time for money. You should be earning money when you're at work, when you're asleep. It should have that potential to be a relatively passive income source. And that's the reason why that's the route I went down when it comes to me making more money. And there's a couple of reasons for that. Number 1, I'm not the best employee in the world. And number 2, I wanted control over my life. And basically through starting a side hustle, building online businesses, I've got to the point where I can choose what I want to do and when I want to do it, which is absolutely amazing. And my side hustles and my business tick all the 3 things that I just mentioned. And if you want to know what I think are the best side hustles out there, make sure you check this video out next.